Hello, everybody, and welcome to the United Stand. We've got a special show for you today. We've got what I would call the most iconic commentator, certainly as a Manchester United fan in my lifetime. Many people hark back to, if they're old enough, Ken Waltonstone from '66, people on the pitch and they've won it. But as a Manchester United fan, and Solskjaer has won it, you'll all know it. And this is the man behind it. This is not Sir yet, but it's. I would give you a night with Clive. But how are you doing? Great to have Clive Tyldesley on the show.
Yeah, I'm not quite a good enough Methodist, I think, to become a knight. I'm afraid might have one or two skeletons in my closet, which we're not going to discuss. That might keep me away from the palace. But all I ever wanted to do is be a football commentator on the telly, and anybody who goes to work every day looking forward to the job is a very, very lucky person, and I know I am certainly that.
Exactly. Well, we've got lots to talk about. We've got an interesting story we're going to delve into about Forest and United, which a lot of people will find funny with my background. But let's start off with the big moment, and this is what everyone will be interested in. I remember that night vividly. I was living in Dublin at the time at a house party, 1999, Barcelona, Champions League final. Now, I always said the goal for me was the Sheringham goal took so much emotion. And I remember you shouting, Sheringham, and the equaliser. And then within 2 minutes, you're uttering those absolutely iconic words. I mean, look, when my wife told me she loved me for the first time, that gives me goosebumps. But every time I hear you say Solskjaer has won it, it's even though I'm saying it now and I'm getting it. I'm not going to get you to do a recreation because we've all heard it. But talk me through that night, that emotion. And what it felt like to be in that position where you basically became a legend.
It was the most important night of my career. Without it, well, it's interesting what you. I suppose in many ways the first break that you get is always the biggest break, and I really, really wanted to get into the business. So the phone call that I got to tell me that I could be a T-boy at a local radio station in Nottingham quite a few years earlier might conceivably be the most important moment in my professional life. But 98-99 was my first season as ITV senior commentator. The late great Brian Moore retired after the '98 World Cup final, and I took over. And you can only be as good as the material that you work with. And throughout that season, the material was sensational. ITV were the sole rights holders to Champions League football. Manchester United's group games were gripping, full of goals. They only just qualified for the knockout stages. And then those knockout stages are in many ways so much a part of the legend that's grown around Oli and Barcelona as the two goals themselves. And Manchester United achieved a great deal already. They're already considered to be the biggest football club certainly in the UK and arguably Europe. But obviously winning the three major trophies available to them in one season is something that they hadn't achieved, and very few clubs of that status had even got close to. So the story, the build-up, the Schmeichel save from Bergkamp in the last minute of the FA Cup semi-final at Villa Park, and the Ryan Giggs goal that followed in extra time, coming from behind to win the final Premier League game in the manner that they did. The FA Cup final was, I couldn't possibly call it a non-event, but they were 2 up in 20 minutes and actually won it pretty comfortably. Yeah. And so they marched on to Barcelona with a certain amount of momentum, and I think more than anything, a feeling of fate. And I suppose the words that I found around those crucial goals echoed that. And I know that the Sheringham goal is a particularly sort of almost your favourite. That was clearly what revived their hopes on the night. And the best thing that I did of all as a commentator on the night was to take a breath after each time the ball had crossed the line, give myself some thinking time. The worst thing I did, by the way, was saying, and Solskjaer has won it, because I broke the cardinal rule of football. I called the winner over the line before they'd won. But probably the line, if you like, I'm not a great one for, oh, that was a great line, it was a great line. It's very much a matter of opinion. But name on the trophy is what I said after the thinking time, after Sheringham equalised. And there was just that feeling that this is meant to be, this is somehow written. And what followed, the greatest post-match interview that any manager has ever given. Football, bloody hell. Don't ask me, basically, he was saying. Don't ask me what happened. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, that all had that sort of magical, mysterious sense of something greater taking a hold of Manchester United's destiny at that time. And looking back now, you've got to believe that whatever God you worship, somebody winked at Manchester United that night.
Definitely. I mean, it's interesting to hear you say that, because ITV and Champions League football went hand in hand that season. And as a United fan, I remember long after your commentary, sitting on a beach in Malahide outside Dublin with a cigar and a bottle of whiskey with a couple of friends, not wanting to go to bed and saying we should never go to bed because we'll never get it this good again. Even if we did a treble again, you can't script that last few minutes of an epic season. The emotion in you, was that, were you emotional? Were you, as a commentator, is that a cardinal sin? Or were you, when you said Solskjaer has won it, was that emotion of you? Were you firmly behind United? Did you lose yourself in the moment? Or is that, you're too professional for that?
I think I'd have been emotional if Bayern had gone down the other end and equalised and it'd gone to extra time and they'd won the shootout, which they would have done. And we wouldn't be having this conversation now. Let's say that you work with moments. As a commentator, you work with moments. And the most magical thing of all about football is that it's decided in moments. Jeff Hurst's second goal, Diego Maradona's first goal. What if the referee hadn't seen Beckham kick out? What if he decided it wasn't worth a red card, which it wasn't? All of those things, the disallowed goals, the fluky goals, the last minute goals, we all sit in studios or in pubs or in beaches in Malahide and play pundit after the event with the benefit of hindsight. Roy Hodgson, who's a really good man and a really good friend of mine, said to me once, and maybe it's not an original thought, football is analysed from the last whistle to the first. It's played the other way. and if something happens differently in the second minute, the rest of the 88 minutes don't, dear old Jose, who could convince himself that if Manchester United had a penalty turned down in the first minute and it finished 0-0, that they'd actually won the game 1-0. No, because if he'd scored the penalty, the rest of the game would have been totally different. And that's the majesty of these wonderful moments. And the secret really is, I'm never been a surfer in my life, and I'm not one for thrill rides, but it's to ride the wave. And to ride the wave, I guess you have to concentrate and have a certain amount of technique. But more than anything, you have to concentrate, but you have to enjoy it. And particularly when you're serving the audience, which as a broadcaster you must do. And the clue is in the word broadcasting. So you're commentating to 20 million people that night, of all ages and levels of interest in football, levels of understanding of what they're watching. So somehow you've got to come up with something which conveys the emotion to them. So you've got to become emotional and involved in that instant yourself. But you've also got to do your job and keep your head and take that pause and give yourself some thinking time. Ron Atkinson alongside me was desperate to come in at that point. And sometimes I don't think, I mean, there's a famous Liverpool goal, sorry to mention Liverpool at this stage, but the equaliser that Gerrard scored against Olympiacos and Andy Gray was in straight away, all over Martin Tyler, you beauty or whatever, take a bow wherever it was. Sometimes that's fine, but actually if you can control it, it's better if that guy gives the analysis over the replay. So I actually pushed Ron back a little bit when the equaliser went in, try to buy ourselves some time. And try to find the words which, when you watch it back, when any Manchester United fan watch it back, and there'll be Manchester United fans looking at this who are not even old enough to, they maybe weren't even born in 1999. So yeah, somehow the words will last. You know, like a good song that was made before you were born, but can still talk about love in a way that you would understand. So that's kind of in my little way, in my little world, crazy, strange, odd little world. You're just trying to find the words which will stand the test of time.
It must be amazing, actually, just on that, to know, and I'll verify this, and everyone will listen, and will verify it as well. To know that, you know, you said you lived the dream doing this job, but to know your legacy will live on and on and on and on, long past you've retired, long past that, with those words, because I can't think of a bit of commentary for Manchester United in a period where we won so much, and in a club that has won so much that comes close to that. You must be, you know, very proud. And also, just on that as well, I'm so glad Ron Atkinson was held back. As much as his commentary was great on that game, it would have ruined it if he just jumped in on that bit.
He shouts out when just before the equaliser, when Schmeichel appears in the penalty area, you hear him come in. The big goalkeepers come forward, which again is not. It's not. Listen, there are certain techniques and disciplines to any profession, and ours is one of those. But there has to be a spontaneity about it. You have to get it, become immersed and involved in the event. And you know, I was sat next to Ron the fateful night in 2004 in Monaco when he ended his career, and I was shocked and sickened by what he said that night. But I, funny enough, had cause to reflect on that incident just recently, and you know, 15 years of friendship can't be wiped away quite that easily. You know, however disgusted I was and surprised by what he said, and I had a lot of very, very good times with Ron Atkinson. I guess he is a friend. I've not had any great contact with him in recent times, but yeah, you know, the phone rang and he wanted something from me. You don't forget all of that, and so that was a night that we came through together in one piece. And as I say, I'm going to tell you a story now from the World Cup semi-final, the last World Cup, which is arguably the biggest football match I've ever commentated on television. Certainly the largest audience, 28 million watched England against Croatia. And can I swear on this?
Yeah, yeah.
No. So this is a literal translation of what happened. I had a producer who travels on the tournaments with me, and you know, it was Glenn Hoddle in Russia. And on the afternoon of the game, and we had it exclusively on ITV, so it was our game, and it was going to be a massive audience. And the producer, who's probably done 5-6 tournaments with me, said to me at lunchtime, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, fine. Yeah, I don't need anything at all. Absolutely cool. What time are we leaving the stadium?" That sort of thing. He said, "You don't seem very excited." And I said, "I can only fuck up tonight." And I actually apologized to her 2 minutes, not for the language, 2 minutes later, just for almost taking the sense of wonder, the excitement that she was feeling. But as a professional in 2018, as it was then, Twitter age, you know, buzzard circling, can I enhance my reputation as a broadcaster in any way during the night? Not really. Not really. I mean, maybe if England had won and I'd come up with a line, you know, like
maybe a Solskjaer moment again, yeah.
Maybe, but actually, in 2018, now 2020, the more likely is that you'll say something which will tarnish your career or end your career. Or I'm not about to blurt out something which I think is insensitive or abusive, but something which, will make a headline in the Mail Online. And I don't mean to sound skeptical or cynical about my business. I love my job. I love football. I love this kind of engagement with the fans of football. But I say, in the selfie Twitter age, anybody with even a P-list celebrity like me, I'm afraid that unless you concentrate very, very hard, chances that you will F up.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I've never thought of it like that. The world is changing. I mean, let's we obviously are a United channel, so let's talk a bit about United and bring it to the present just for a couple of minutes. With regards to Manchester United at the moment, certainly since Sir Alex retired, what's your feeling as to why Manchester United are where they are at the moment, which is a club that realistically is nowhere near a title challenge and is consistently challenging for, I would say, probably fourth spot.
Well, you can't just sort of say, in the wake of Sir Alex Ferguson's retirement and then sort of move on as if, these things happen. I mean, we're talking about the rarity of a manager who actually had control of the football club. Anything and everything that happened around about Old Trafford did so with his nod, and if it wasn't specifically with his nod, it was probably with David Gill's nod. And Manchester United as a football club lost them at pretty much the same time. So there were 4 very big shoes to fill, and those shoes haven't been filled. Of course, they haven't been filled. It would have been well nigh impossible, even with the benefit of hindsight. I mean, who of the people that have managed Manchester United since then was clearly and definitely and simply not up to the job when they were appointed? None of them. David Moyes is a really, really capable football manager. He knew British football. The man who was going out trusted him implicitly. He was it might not have been everybody's idea of the glamour appointment that they were looking for, but it was a sound appointment in the circumstances. Louis van Gaal's won what he's won. Jose Mourinho's won what he's won. I'm not in a position to analyse or rate Ed Woodward as a football administrator. I don't know. I'm not a football administrator myself. He doesn't do what he does between 3 and 5 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon where we can watch him. So again, with the benefit of hindsight, you can say, "Oh, that wasn't a great buy. Why did we let him go?" But every football club can say that. So I think that I've got one of my very, very closest friends in football was linked with the Manchester United job more than once. And he said to me, "You don't want to be the man who follows the man. You want to be the man who follows the man who follows the man." Maybe 2 down the line, the football club may have found its place in the world again, really. And while the balance sheet may tell you that place in the world is unchanged, that's not where trophies are won. It's obviously easier to put together a winning team if you have those resources available to you, but it's not automatic. There's nothing automatic about that. Circumstances have to come together, and so where are they now? Well, if now is where we left off, and let's hope that where we left off is kind of where we come back. Then I think they are on and up in a Premier League where 2 teams are clearly better than the others, one clearly better than the other at the moment. But the good news for Manchester United is that Arsenal have got problems, Tottenham Hotspur have got problems, and Chelsea are dealing with issues that have come their way. So the traditional Big Six has been shaken about a little bit. I think Leicester City are a good team and a good club and in good management, but I wouldn't say that they're markedly stronger than Manchester United right now as a football team, and certainly they don't have the resources to become stronger still. I think the signs have been good in the last year, in so much that I think the recent signings have been additions that will improve the team and players who will be with the club for the foreseeable future. I'll probably wake up with a horse's head in my bed tonight for saying this, but if Mino Raiola is out of the building, great. I think I'm not saying he can't come into the building if he's got somebody who Manchester United want to buy, but the thought of him being around in any kind of controlling interest, I don't think is healthy for the football club, which is refreshing and trying to move forward.
Just on that, Clive, just quickly, because I do agree with you on that one. But as somebody who probably has done it for France a few times and United, Paul Pogba, I imagine, is a joy to commentate on. but he has got this Mino Raiola thing. Do you think, from a United point of view, does your passion to have Pogba in a United shirt override the fact that, let's be honest, we don't know because Pogba never speaks publicly, but Mino Raiola does? Is that something that you think long-term United should distance themselves from, or is it worth pursuing with a talent like Pogba?
I can't make Pogba out as a player. About 18 months ago, no, coming on 2 years, England played France in a friendly match, actually, in Paris. It was one of the most exhilarating, brilliant. France had played sent off very early in the second half. They played nearly half the game with 10 men. Pogba was out of this world. And obviously I saw him in a Juventus shirt where he played with more discipline than I've seen him play before or since. The talent and the athleticism is there. If I'm going to say something derisory about him, he always looks like a 17-year-old to me. He always looks like a brilliant talent who's just arrived in the game and is still a little bit raw and is still finding his way and is still learning the ropes.
Inconsistent.
He's a world champion. It's more than inconsistent. It's I don't want to create a male headline. Clive Tyldesley says Paul Pogba is irresponsible, but there is an irresponsibility about the way he plays football, in my opinion. I mean that there'll be just something he can brush off because he is a world champion and he is an extraordinarily talented player. On balance, right now, and for the last 12 months, I feel he's been a distraction for Manchester United. I feel that in this sort of era of a clean sweep, not clean sweep, a new brush, just clearing the decks. Yeah, obviously Lukaku was worth his place in the squad, but you'd kind of made your mind up about him, and it's sort of now and never. There comes a now and never point where you think, oh, what the heck? If somebody will give us 60, 70, 80 million, on you go, mate. And yeah, I'm sure you'll come back. Hopefully you'll come back one day in the Champions League quarterfinal and knock us out. It'd be nice to think we might get to one again. But I just, I feel now that in Bruno Fernandes and Harry Maguire, that you've got players who've bought into the kind of the vibe, the fresh start, the new beginning, come on, let's roll our sleeves up and really fill this red shirt with sweat for the club. I'm not sure you'll ever get that from Paul Pogba, but he'll win games. There's no doubt about that. He'll win games because he has that talent. And I get the feeling, and everything I've heard is that he is not a bad lad. He's a good type, but
something holds him back, doesn't it? I don't know what it is.
Distraction.
Just talking about the summer ahead as well, lots and lots of links with Manchester United and Jadon Sancho. I think the right-hand side, most people would say, is that sort of not the final piece, but it's a piece that needs to be solved. What are your thoughts on Jadon Sancho as a talent, and do you think he would be a good fit for Manchester United? Is it time he came back to England?
He's not a secret, is he? I mean, there are other clubs that are going to want to take him away from Dortmund. I mean, he's a Liverpool player too, isn't he? I mean, he's anybody you want. But if you're thinking of a setup at the moment where somebody can play from wide, cut inside and score goals, you've only got to look 30 miles away. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what's in his mind. So I can't say. I'll tell you a player who I think will be good for Manchester United if they can get him, Marcus Rashford. I think he's a really good player.
Yeah,
I can't remember who he was playing for when football stopped, but he was playing really well. So I think he'd be a really good addition to the Manchester United team.
Well, that's the thing when we come back. Rashford is like a new signing, isn't he?
He's been missed, actually. They've both been missed. And I mean, Pogba is a Manchester United player. So that's, to be back, I can't even remember where Manchester United are on the table, 5th or 6th, isn't it? 5th, is it? I mean, to be there, without those players and with the turnover that there's been, I think there's progress, and Marcus is very much part of that kind of, that culture of wanting to play, sort of kiss the badge. If they can get Jesse refocused, and because I think he's a really smart player, and I think they've got a relationship and they're good for each other. There are other, there are various green shoots around the place. I think it's slightly ironic that the money's been spent on a right back who I think is a good player and is obviously is an improvement. He's an upgrade on what was there before, but now another right back has emerged through the ranks who, he's playing at left back, but Brandon, in many ways, if you're not careful, he's not going to get as much game time as maybe he needs. And I think he's a real good prospect again, who's bought into everything to do with Manchester United. And Luke Shaw's playing better, but seems to look more comfortable on the left of the three. Yeah, maybe that's the way forward. But then you would want a proper raiding left wing back, really. So, I mean, there's plenty there to work with. And sure, Jadon Sancho and Jack Grealish and, whoever, James Maddison, whoever is being linked with Manchester United, I'd like to think that they will be in for that calibre of player. But when we do get back, Champions League qualification will play, I'm sure, a big part in deciding where players decide they want to go. And I think this certainly isn't a time for getting carried away with anything, because football is where it is. It's the most important of the least important things. So, I mean, if the thought of Jadon Sancho in a red shirt gets you to sleep at night, then dream on. But yeah, don't kid yourselves. There's going to be an awful lot of people in for him.
It's interesting as well, and I'm sure you share that interest, doing the job that you do so well, that we're going to have, whenever it returns, we're going to have a scenario that's just, obviously people are going to be very excited about it when it comes back, but effectively a 9-game season to end the season. Well, Liverpool will win the league. We don't know who's going to get relegated, and there's going to be a very interesting race for Champions League football, which, as you say, will have a big impact on who signs. We've got to talk about it because we're doing this via technology. We're all in isolation. What's your feeling about football coming back? And I ask everybody, and there's not going to be any great depth to it unless you're a doctor or you've got the ear of not even Boris at the moment, because he's hopefully recovering in a hospital.
I don't get anywhere near him.
No. But some people have said void it. Some people have said hand it to Liverpool. Some people said let's just wait and bring it back because morally that's what it should do whenever.
I'll give you my answer. Next question.
Yeah, it's
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think a lot of people are getting involved. There are certain bodies that are responsible for the running of football that have got to have a plan A, B, and C at the moment. They've got to have ideas and they've got to be discussed. And clearly, this isn't some. There have been one or two kind of rather sort of glib comparisons with the wartime. The war was won on one day, and the next day was peace. We ain't going to have that. Whatever happens, we're going to come back in stages. We're going to come back gradually, and nobody really can guess the time frame for when that begins or how long it takes. And where does football fit into it? I don't know. I mean, I think that there is an inherent fairness in finishing what everybody started before you even start to. I would rather see a foreshortened, where are we now, 2021 season with some kind of new regulations whereby this is what's going to happen, rather than anybody seriously pretend that either we stop where we are now or we tear up the whole thing and forget it ever happened. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, there are how many teams? Eight teams waiting to win the Champions League. It's not all about Liverpool by any means. It's about all kinds of issues. But we're now discussing not that, but how much of their wages footballers should be giving up to the NHS. We're talking about, all kinds of other related matters, and I don't have an answer. So the best thing really is either let's turn the clock back to when I first became a Manchester United fan, or to 1999, or let's turn it forward 20 years and have real fun and try to work out where football might be then.
I was going to ask you about that. We wanted to do it at the start, but brilliant the way it's flowed. I am from Nottingham. I get called a Forest fan, and my story as to why I'm a United fan goes back to my granddad, who wouldn't have gone to games in then because he's from Nottingham, but probably from things like the Football Post and everything, was just as a late teenager, I suppose, in love, like most of the country were, with this team that Sir Matt Busby built, with people like Duncan Edwards from Dudley and Sir Bobby from up northeast. What is your story? Because it sort of goes United and then Forest, but probably both. I don't know.
Yeah, well, here it goes. Take a breath. You won't be saying anything for about 5 minutes, Mark. So make yourself.
Go put the kettle on.
Born in Bury, a greater Manc. Although, funny enough, it was Bury, Lancashire then, really, and the kind of family roots started to move north up the Rossendale Valley rather than into central Manchester. But my dad, I actually was brought home from the hospital to the house in Ratcliffe Road, Bury, and who is our next door neighbour? The Bury manager was our next door neighbour. So I grew up with football next door to me. But my dad was a United fan, and he took me when I was 5. And I was fortunate enough to grow up in an era when 3 European Footballers of the Year, Ballon d'Or winners, played in the same Manchester United team, and Manchester United won things. And I was part of that. By the time I was sort of old enough to go on my own and old enough to have a driving license and drive on my own, times had changed a little bit. I can remember the successes at the end of the 60s and into the 70s, and I was there. My dad, the 67 title winning match, we went up the pitch with everybody afterwards and so on. So I went to the 63 FA Cup final. I can't remember a great deal about it apart from the crunchy bars and the Corona Cherryade. I had my priorities. I was 7 years of age. They were more important than the game. Dennis was my idol, my boyhood hero. I went on the Stretford end. I didn't really belong on the Stretford end. I was a middle-class grammar school boy. I kind of, what's the Pulp song, Common People? I was that sculptor
student like it.
Martin's College. I just wanted to be for a couple of hours a week with the common people, if you like. That sounds sort of, I don't mean it in any other way, but I had this kind of sort of second life where I was, I don't know, some trainee joiner on the Wythenshawe estate, because they were the people I was with. I was on the football specials. I saw a lot of hooliganism. Didn't take part in any of it. Too much of a was. But yeah, I mean, I lived as part of that era and into the time when I could support them home and away, which actually the season that I saw the most games was the second division season, 74-75, which was my final year at uni. I think I missed about half a dozen games. Tommy Dock, the tartan scarf knotted to the wrist, the patchwork jumper and the loons. That was me. In 1975, I graduated from university and just walked into my dream job. There was a commercial radio station opening in Nottingham at the time. They took me on as a T-boy, nothing more. But I was soon doing a bit of everything. And of course, what I wanted to do was be a football commentator. And within a year, I was their Nottingham Forest correspondent, traveling home and away with the team. I was the same age as the players. Guys like Martin O'Neill was my first big friend in football, still a good friend. People like him and John Robertson were my mates. If I wasn't waiting to interview them or commentating on them, I was going out and having a drink with them. Suddenly I found myself commentating on my mates, and I still am to this day. And most of them are managers rather than players. But who do I support? I support them, and my affections travel with them. I went to the 76 Cup final, which was the FA Cup final was a much, much bigger deal then in 1976 than it is now. And Manchester United lost to Southampton to very shock defeat. And I came away from there pretty miserable. But that's the last time I can really remember being a Manchester United fan. It wasn't because they lost. It's just that this other love had come into my life, that this career, this thing that was, it's very emotional, very emotive to be trying this. Brian Clough's Nottingham Forest, I was seeing him three times a week, and to say actually traveling with them, I was almost part of the team, part of the club, and it just left me, and it would have done whoever it was. And then Nottingham Forest left me because I moved on to Merseyside and Everton and Liverpool. Though when they met in the '86 FA Cup final at Wembley, I knew every single player on the field. They were all really good friends of mine. That is that's not something that I've obviously got today, but Gareth Southgate was at our wedding. Of course, I want his teams to do well, and I happen to be English. So, yeah, and then, David Moyes is a good friend. I wanted him to win every single match when he was managing Manchester United. One of his successors, less so.
I wonder who. There's a question that just came into my mind there. Roy Keane played for Forest and United. Now, I don't know whether it's bitterness from Roy that he always says Brian Clough's the better manager, but as a Nottingham lad, I'm fully aware of not even just Nottingham, at Derby as well, what Brian Clough achieved. As a follower and somebody who's very close to Forest and United, Sir Alex Ferguson and Brian Clough. I'm not saying to say who's better, but in a way, I suppose I am. What are your opinions on what Roy Keane said about that? Is Brian Clough better?
I didn't know him when he was a player. I was frightened to death of him when he was. I was as frightened of him as his opponents were. If he ever came out for interview, I thought, oh no. But he's a pal now. He's actually quite self-effacing. He's very opinionated, but he loves a tussle. He loves an argument, and he's the same off screen as he is on. So what you see is what you get, and that opinion will be his. He had some run-ins with Alec, obviously, and they're reflected as anybody would be. If we have a run-in with a boss, we never maybe think that we, as my grandma used to say, take people as you find them. And I mean, Fergie was good to me. I've had the two biggest rollickings of my life from Sir Alex Ferguson. But I think they were part of the initiation ceremony. I think they were just to see what I was made of. And I survived them. And he took me into his trust in a way that, very few managers have done, with, team information to help me in the build up to a game and stuff. And I'll never forget that. His greatest single quality for me was those hairdryers that I felt they stopped eventually, because you manage differently in 1980 something to what you do in 20 something. You parent differently. The world changes. You've got to adapt. And Sir Alex Ferguson adapted magnificently. When you think back to it, the way he kind of treated Ryan Giggs, for instance, at the start, almost like a strict father who wouldn't let him do any interviews, wouldn't let him out. Not sure that he didn't get rid of Lee Sharp specifically because he thought he was influencing Ryan. That kind of heavy-handed management, but that's not how he managed Cristiano Ronaldo, because it was in a different time. And that's, of all the many, many qualities for Alex Ferguson, his adaptability, the way that he moved with the times. Could Brian have done that? It's very difficult. I mean, we're having a serious debate, so I'm not making a frivolous remark. I mean, Brian was drinking when I was working alongside him, or working kind of under him, really. I was terrified of him too. He was very, very good to me. And at his best, he was a lovely, warm and caring man. But, it's a matter of record. He said it 100 times himself, that the alcohol changed him and his career. And he did manage in fairly old-fashioned ways, really. There was that fear factor. And, whereas Fergie had that in the early years, I think he changed for the times. Whether Brian could have done that, I'm not absolutely certain. Ultimately, I mean, Martin, as I say, is a really good friend, and he'd say this. Listen, Martin had a real tussle with Jose Mourinho when Celtic played Porto in the UEFA Cup final, and he probably had a view of Jose to this day. But if anybody ever asks Martin about Jose privately, publicly, he will always start with, "Hey, listen, he's won a lot more than I've ever won," and that's your CV as a manager, really. Obviously, you need good players, good teams to give yourself a chance of winning things. But when you've won what he has won, and what you won, what Alec has won, Carlo Ancelotti. There's no argument. I mean, you can argue that they maybe reached a stage where some of the ability, some of the talent, some of the magic has waned, but you can't argue against winners. And Brian was a winner in his time, but whether he could have sustained success over the length of Sir Alex's reign, I would have to doubt.
Yeah, and I think that's demonstrated also by the amount of assistant managers he changed and moved with, wasn't it, as well? I want to ask you, I'll do it from a United point first of all. If I was to say over the Premier League era, what would be your sort of top 3 Manchester United players that you've commentated on? Because I suppose as a commentator, and there might be people out there that are looking to go into that, you look at a game. I mean, we do the watch-alongs on the United Stand. It's nothing anywhere near as in-depth of what you would do. But are there certain players that are a joy to comment on because you're not? It is your job. It's a very hard job as well.
I'm not very good at best 11s, I'm afraid. I don't. There's a lot of that going on at the moment. A lot of people with a lot of time to fill, and I think every moment in football belongs in its moment. I think every, if you think back to that 1999 final, okay, Keane didn't play. Who was the best Manchester United player in that team? For me, the only one who would be a strong contender to be the very best in his position in the world would be the goalkeeper. And so who was the best player in that Manchester United team? For me, Peter Schmeichel. Now, how do you compare Peter Schmeichel with Dwight Yorke or Keane if he'd been on the field, or Scholes if he'd been on the field, Bex was on the field? You can't make that comparison. You're comparing a boxer with a rugby player, really. I mean, they're almost playing different sports, and that's one of the great things about football, is that it is a team game. It's not, you could, if you're asking me who I think the greatest golfer in the world is, then it's an easier debate to have, because even though, I don't know, somebody who played like Hogan in the 50s, you can't really compare with Woods in the 21st century with the equipment and everything. You can. They're playing the same game. They're trying to get the ball around the same golf course. Football, you can't do that. So I often talk about players. When I left Nottingham, the local station, I went to work on Merseyside for a long time. So I was around that Liverpool team of the late 70s and early 80s, who were the best team in the world. Graham Souness had an influence on all of the other 21 players on the field. When he was on the field, both as a footballer, because he's a really, really good footballer, and as a personality, a character, a menace, a threat, a leader, a talker, a tackler, a threatener, he could influence the other 21 players on the field. Craig Johnson said it's like having your big brother on the field with you. If anything happens to you, he'll come and sort it out. Roy Keane was like that. Yeah. Roy Keane was like that. You could tell. You could just see. You could see. And listen, he is a mate. From time to time, he called out his teammates in a way which I'm not sure that I would applaud. And listen, the tackle on Haaland, I definitely wouldn't applaud. But, there are elements of Roy's game which I can't even understand, let alone applaud. But in terms of having an impact on everybody on the football field, which I would think a manager would want. I mean, even though they had their differences in the end, whenever he wrote Keane on the team sheet, Fergie must have felt, well, I've got one I can rely on today. And I know that if I need anything doing, if I need any managing doing during the game, he'll go and do it. So, listen, he's not as talented as I was fortunate enough to see George Best. There were times towards the end of his career when George Best was the best tackler in the Manchester United team, was the best header of the ball in the Manchester United team, was the best passer in the Manchester United. Quite apart from the dribbles and the goals, he was a fantastic all-round footballer. And I think that if he'd been motivated and managed, then he could have played in the 21st century. But impact, just effect, influence, what the difference between W and D, the difference between D and L, Roy Keane. But Roy Keane would be, I would put him right up there just because of that aura, really. And it wasn't just an aura which you could admire for 5 minutes and then think, yeah, well, we needn't worry about him. It was an aura that was there throughout every single time, every second that he spent on the field.
Yeah, I'm so pleased to hear that, Clive, because I didn't know you were going to say that. But being a Nottingham lad, I remember, and I was still living in Nottingham those days. I remember Keane coming over from Co-Bramblers. I think 16,000 Clough got him for, and the very different player that he became at United. But you're 100% right. What Roy Keane gave to that team, Sir Alex Ferguson, no matter how deep their argument is, and I've got no knowledge of that, would not have the trophies he's got without him. And it saddens me that. And maybe it saddens Roy, I don't know. It saddens me the way the class of 92 were fantastic. Rooney was fantastic. But Keane is sort of, because of this breakdown in the relationship with Sir Alex, he wasn't even at the anniversary game last year. He is, for me, such a massive part. And if I had to bring one player back, people will say Ronaldo, Rooney. It would always be Roy Keane for the reason you've just said there. You can't buy those personalities. John Terry to a lesser extent, Gerrard for Liverpool, but Roy Keane.
Yeah. Nemanja Vidic would be up there again. I mean, he played with, you can make a very, very strong argument saying Rio was a much better player. Yeah, and having them both great, because that's what teams are about, having a bit of everything. But who could you absolutely? Here's a, if your subscribers and viewers, followers want to put down a Manchester United team who you could rely on. Absolutely rely on. If there was one game that you had to win, by the way, Ronaldo would be in it, because I think you could rely on him. But it's a different kind of exercise, because that's what a manager's doing. It's
percentage game, isn't it?
Yeah. Who would be the Manchester United player who sort of the talented Manchester United player who really divides opinions?
Pogba.
Yeah. Berbatov or whatever, whoever it might be, the guy that
Anthony Martial,
when he's good. I mean, right now, Martial. I did a couple of games before the stoppage, where I mean, I'd say I'm not a fan anymore, but in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, mate, you're not doing it. And then suddenly he's come up with a couple of goals, which nobody else in the team could score. Nobody else in the team could have scored the couple of goals. I can't bring them exactly to mind where they were. One was a really good header, and then you think, okay, but is he going to do it? Yeah, fine. I mean, we've all got our flaws and our weaknesses. There's no such thing as a perfect footballer, but the ones, I've just been writing something about the difference between you being inside and outside football. As I say, I was born into a world where the manager lived next door. In a way, I've always been inside football. So I've always seen football, even as a child. I saw it from a professional's point of view. I saw what the difference between the W and an L when Uncle Dave came home. And I think gives you a slightly different appreciation. I'm sure there are a lot of fans who think the players don't care as much as they do. And by the way, there is some evidence very occasionally to back that view up. But I've seen a lot more evidence to the contrary. They're professionals. They feel it. Their pride, their vanity is affected by how they perform, how their team performs, if their team is successful. And that's what a manager, has got to somehow galvanize in the players, that pride, both in the shirt and in themselves. And if you've got guys in your dressing room and you're looking around that dressing room at halftime and you're two down, you're thinking, well, I'm not bringing you off because I know I can rely on you, but you've done okay, but I'm not sure about you. Come on, you're off. Sorry. That's ultimately, when it's your profession, you've got to rely on the guy next to you. You're on a chain gang with 10 other guys, and if somebody's dragging their feet, then it brings the whole thing to a standstill. And so, the Vidics and the Keanes are the guys that you go back to, I think.
I would agree. And interestingly enough, going back to 99, Andy Cole comes off, Solskjaer comes on, because Sir Alex knows you've got someone there. If a chance falls to them, he studies the game, and that's what Ollie used to do. Let's sort of round it up then, Clive. It's been fantastic. But I'll combine it as the two. What's the future for you? What are you working on? And what do you feel like the future of football is over the next 10 years? As somebody, I don't know when you're looking to retire, but you're still very much part of the game. Do you see over the next 10 years, the way it's going? I mean, we're obviously a fan channel that's sort of come over in the last 10 years. You've mentioned Twitter, social media, lots of technology, VAR. Can you see more change in the way football is?
I can see changes in the way football is, and I can see changes in the way football broadcasting, football media consumption. I think it's changing quicker than football. Football is full of traditions, and it does drag its feet. VAR is a really good example of that at the moment. It's I've never been happier in my life than I am now. So I can get sentimental about old matches and old bands and old movies. But actually, I like a lot of contemporary music, and I like a lot of contemporary media. And I think the 21st century football is great. All the sports that we can measure have advanced. You know, all the track and field and stuff, anything we can measure. So it kind of stands to reason that the football has gone forward. So all of these channels that you see on Twitter, you know, when football used to be great and everything, muddy pitches and tackles from behind, no, I'm not sure I buy into any of that. I like 21st century football. I think that it has taken its public for granted for a long time. I obviously have a particular interest as somebody whose principal income comes from terrestrial television. I mean, I work for other channels too, but I've been with ITV since 1996. When ITV or BBC broadcast a game live, if I say even a third round FA Cup replay, which doesn't involve Manchester United or Liverpool or Tottenham, the audience will be 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12 million. When there's a super duper Sunday on Sky and it's Liverpool versus United, you might get 2.1 million peak.
It's amazing.
Now,
really.
Obviously, there's an awful lot of consumption elsewhere, a lot of illegal consumption, but there's a lot of a communal consumption of that product. But it's not quite the same. And so football's engagement with its public, it's got to be careful. And I think that if there is a silver lining to this awful cloud, and you know, we've had a little bit of fun, my wife and I, with some social media japes, but I'm always very conscious of trying to get the balance right, because this will be an absolute misery to people, not just people who are ill, but people who are struggling with being alone, struggle with all kinds of aspects. And this is I mean, crisis is an overused word in football, you know, like tragedy and disaster and great. I tend not to go there if I can with the vocabulary of football, because they, you know, people die in tragedies. You know, goalkeeper letting the ball through his legs is not a tragedy. So this is a crisis. It is a crisis in all aspects, and all industries are going to come out of it differently than they went in. And football is going to come out of this differently. I'm not quite sure how, but I think some of the reality checks that it's needed may be happening now, certainly in terms of the money that's swashing around in the game and where some of it's going. And I think it will be a test of how loyal its audience is to the game. I mean, if you're a Manchester United fan, you're a Manchester United fan. You can't wait for them to play again. But are you missing the rest of football quite as much as you were before? I say how we consume it. There's a lot of chatter going on at the moment, and I think there's a feeling that there's going to be a big fanfare of trumpets, and the teams are going to walk back out again, and this is just what the nation needs. The longer you learn to live without things, you know,
it's like grief, isn't it?
I had to go a week without Weetabix last week. I had to have granola for breakfast. I quite like it, actually, you know. And now that's a really trite example, but it has changed everything. This and I say people have learned to live without football, and so football's got to come back and be good, and maybe a little bit better, and a little bit more considerate, and a little bit more communal. It's going to need to reach out to people, and that terrestrial audience is going to be important to just remind people what this is about, and how much, you know, not only it takes out of you emotionally, but how much it takes out of you financially to support your football team. And this is good. That's when the really interesting debates will begin. Not about who finishes fifth, because that will matter, but actually how far. The question I would ask everybody is: will you go as far for Manchester United when this comes back than you would before it went away? I hope the answer is yes, because if it's not for Manchester United, then goodness knows what it's going to be for Macclesfield Town. But football can't come back and just breeze back and start to act as if nothing's happened, because things have happened to everybody in every way. And football's got to take note of that, and it's got to come back a bit better than it went out.
Fantastic. It's a very, very interesting point as well, because you're right. I've got young kids, and the one thing that I think that will come out of this that may be a positive in a crisis, like you say, is that they realise just how quickly things can be taken away, and how you can interact with people a lot more in your own household rather than your phones and stuff. So it'd be very, very interesting. And I do, just on that, I mean, obviously being an ITV presenter, I think one of the big things that we've really lost, that I've noticed, is Champions League football off ITV going to BT. I think that was a big shame. You really do see that reflected on a Champions League night as well, because we'll see it when United are in it, that we'll be doing the show, and a lot of people say, I'm not watching it tonight, I'm not paying for BT. Whereas when it's on terrestrial TV, everyone can watch it. And I do feel it should be protected, like Wimbledon is and things like that. Well,
yeah, you're talking to
money talks, though.
Listen, I work for BT, and this season's the first time I've been doing their fourth or fifth game. I've been doing it off a screen in their studios in Stratford and London. But I've been working for them. I've been working for NBC in the last couple of years on Premier League in the States, and the income now, Premier League income from abroad, is greater than it is from the domestic rights. So there are a lot of different considerations, and one of the things I like about channels like this is that there's a bit of I'm a huge admirer of organisations like FSA, FSF, that look after the interests of the turnstile fan, because without the turnstile fan, the game is absolutely dead. And of course, I was that turnstile fan, home and away, football specials, running into sort of Euston on Saturday lunchtime and filling the place with noise and threat. And, here we are. And that kind of feeling you can't get just as a television viewer. But the television consumer of football, I lost my dad last year, the guy that gave me Manchester United. And he spent the last 20 years of his life really just sitting in a chair watching footy on TV. And in a way, he is as important as anybody to the football economy and to the football culture, because there are people watching this now who would love to come to Old Trafford who just can't get there. They can't afford it, or they live on the opposite side of the planet. And so this is the only way they can support Manchester United, or show there's one of the only ways. And so this is really, really important, because ultimately any kind of football media, whether the football correspondent of the Times in London or whatever you are, is to do with connecting fans with the game. That's what we are. We're just the middlemen and women who connect the two. And there's a huge responsibility that goes with that. And I could talk for hours about that too. But if you start to disregard the subscriber to this channel or to a Sky, I wouldn't disregard anybody who only watches football on BT Sport and Sky and never gets to a game. That's cool. That's maybe the only way you can follow football, and maybe you get your money's worth out of that, and that's all fine. And I wouldn't decry the production standards or the professionalism. I know a lot of the guys who work on those and they care about their jobs every bit as much as I do. But in terms of being the administrators who are trying to strike a balance, the old balance in Champions League football was maybe Tuesday night on ITV and Wednesday night on Sky. That, for me, made sense. I mean, once upon a time, ITV had it all. It was all free to air. But then reality comes in, and you have to try to sell some exclusive rights to somebody else and make a little bit more money in order to pay the players, have the best players. And so you can think about Jadon Sancho and you can think about Jack Grealish. That's all part of it. Yeah. So, that's not dirty money. That's how the business runs. But you've got to engage the people in the first place with the game, with the product. And if there's only 1 million watching it instead of 10 million, you're giving yourself an issue to start with, and you're not serving your public in the way that you need to. And maybe we'll come out of this a bit differently.
Clive, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. I could talk to you for hours, and I'm sure everybody watching this feels the same. So all I wanted to say towards the end, unless there's anything else you want to add, is thank you so much for coming on. And I think so many people will get so much from it.
It's my absolute pleasure. I was you once upon a time. I grew out of it, but then only because I got a dream job, which just became a romance that was even greater than the romance of supporting my football team. But I can remember how bad it felt walking away from Wembley after losing an FA Cup final to a championship team. And I'll never, ever forget that feeling.
Well, thank you very much to Clive Tyldesley. I hope you've all enjoyed the video. Please smash a like on the video, and we'll be hearing plenty more from Clive, of course, in the future. Absolute legend, Manchester United commentator. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for watching.
Stay safe, everybody. Stay safe. Do what you're told.